Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Seabass of WNWS of Jackson, Tennessee. This episode is presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. Thank you also to our co-presenting sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. The news is presented by Sutherland and Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These guys will shoot you straight on your rights and options when you've been injured in an accident. Call them at 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can also visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. College athletes may be getting paid sooner than we thought. The NCAA announced on Wednesday it is moving closer to letting college athletes be paid while they're in school. Quote, the member schools have embraced very real change that's necessary to modernize our name, image, and likeness rules, NCAA President Mark Emmert said on Wednesday, according to the New York Post. Our guest line presented to you by Boll & Branch, which was started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. Had no idea how comfortable Boll & Branch sheets could be till I got them. They are fair trade certified, meaning they are made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee, where he has had his own show for, I think, over 20 years now. My friend, thanks for being with us. How are you?
Hey, brother. Yeah, doing great. Yeah, 20 and change. Yeah, 20 and a half, like I said when you was a little kid. I'm 20 and a half. It's about 20 and a half years. It's been a wild ride, man. It's been a wild ride for sure. Never wilder than right now, obviously, but I've had a good what did Jimmy Buffett say? And he went to Paris. Some of it's magic, some of it's tragic, but I've had a good life all the way.
Well, it was a good life for 3 days last week. The NFL draft is sort of old news by this point, but we enjoyed it in the Lee household. You and I have not had a chance to talk about it since it's happened, so let's go there.
I'm ready to go. Who do you want to start with? I guess the logical start would be the one who actually got drafted in Keyshawn Vaughn. And I mean, Chris, I just don't know how he could have been drafted into a better situation. You know, it's great. I'm so excited for Keyshawn, and that dude's all about business, man, and that's going to fit in perfectly right there. I mean, he's going to be running to an offense where, I mean, look, what are you going to do? Stack the box? He's going to have lanes. He's going to have opportunity. And I like some of the young pieces on the offensive line. I'm a big Ali Marpet fan, and they continue to improve that. Keyshawn, I'll say this. I thought it would be somewhere in the fourth round, but let me tell you something. That's still values. At 76, you know how I feel about Key. I think he's the total package. I think the things that he didn't show was not because of an inability, but moreover the way the offense was structured. This guy, he's physically ready right now. I fully anticipate Keyshawn Vaughn coming in and having a very meaningful impact on that football team, and possibly even as the starting running back, because there's just nobody. I mean, what are you scared of? What, Ronald Jones, Chris? I mean, Keyshawn's in a great position right now. I expect him to take full advantage of that.
I am looking at franchises where he might have had a better opportunity for early playing time. Thinking maybe, and I'm literally looking at all the NFL running back depth charts as we do this. I cannot think off the top of my head many better situations.
I mean, you're going to have a hard time finding them. You just are. I mean, especially given, look, it's like I said, I mean, there's going to be such a large concentration placed on that passing game. by defensive schemes. And remember something else. I mean, that's got to be the biggest core of pass catchers I've ever seen. You know, if they can block worth their salt, I mean, there should be lanes to run the downfield as well. I mean, think about two tight end formations with Gronkowski and OJ Howard, who the team picked up that option today. So, I mean, he's not going anywhere. Look, put it this way: if Cameron Brate's your third tight end, you're doing okay. And you throw in Mike Evans, who had over 1,100 yards last year before going down, and then Chris Godwin, who had 1,300 yards. Yeah, the key. I mean, we can go over the teams, but I mean, I can't think of many better situations in the entire NFL.
Dolphins probably not because they've got Howard and Breda. That's two guys who can play. Oh boy, I mean it's the Patriots. Well, they got Sony Michelle. I don't know what they're going to do with him. They underused him a
Yeah.
year ago. I mean, the list of teams that
Still
you
have
could put
James
on that
White.
list,
Yeah.
yeah, who catches a lot of balls. Yeah, I'm not seeing one that jumps out that is obviously a better situation than the one that he just landed in.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I mean, I just there's not one when you factor in depth, the running back room, and the fact that there's going to be such a heavy emphasis by defenses on stopping the pass with Tampa Bay, and because they could definitely get to a lot of track mates. Now they're improving, and I love their pickup, their second round pick of Antoine Winfield Jr. out of Minnesota. But their secondary is nothing special. Now what you could see is some track meets, and I think they position themselves nicely to get involved in those.
Pinkney and Lipscomb sign as free agents.
Yeah.
Thoughts on those?
Well, first for Pinkney. Well, first let me just say this: it really sucks because those are both clearly draftable prospects, and should have been drafted. It didn't end up working out that way. They really didn't get to showcase themselves, or at least didn't the way that Keyshawn was certainly able to last year. But let's go to the situation they're in. What about in Atlanta? That's a good place for Jared Pinkney to go. I mean, look, Atlanta wants to throw the football. We know that for sure. And remember, Austin Hooper's in Cleveland, Ohio now.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
got Hayden Hurst, who of course was a late first
yeah,
rounder 3 years ago, and has got some talent.
he does. But think about this for a second, okay? Why is he not there anymore? Because he was extremely expendable. Because Mark Andrews clearly outperformed him in every way.
Yeah, I don't know that
So I
that's
mean,
a bad reflection on Hayden Hurst, though. I mean, he wasn't what they
it's
thought they
not.
were
But
getting. I always liked him in college.
yeah, oh, I did too. I mean, he's a heck of a player at South Carolina. Ain't no doubt about that. But here's what I'll say: for an undrafted free agent, if I'm looking at the guy, if it's Hayden Hurst, I'm just not overly concerned. He hasn't really done much in the NFL so far. And look, it's Baltimore. Think about it. It's Baltimore, Chris. I mean, they live the tight end position. That's such an integral part of their. Think about this. There's such an integral part of their offense, and they were willing to let him get out of town.
Atlanta never used the tight end much until Hooper last year, that I recall, though. So if there's usually not room for one mouth to get fed a lot, I don't know how much room there is for two, three, and four.
Well, think about it like this, though. I mean, if Jared goes in there and recaptures the magic of 2 years ago, I think there's certainly a possibility there. I mean, I don't expect him to start there from day one, obviously, but I mean, it's an optimal situation. I mean, look now. If there's other teams that if he signed with them from a tight end standpoint, well, you just know that he's not going to see the field for the most part outside of injury. I can't say that in Atlanta because I'll say this: at least with Hooper, which is what I mean. Look, there's no sense of going too much further back than Hooper. But Hooper got enough play and enough opportunity that landed him a big fat contract in Cleveland that he was one of the most sought after tight ends in all of free agency. So if he can step up, man, I think there's playing time with Hayden Hurst alongside him or in relief of him. It's not all I'm saying is that's another situation where I don't think I think the situation is pretty good if you're going to go somewhere as an undrafted free agent. I feel like Atlanta's one of those places.
Is there any way Kalijah Lipscomb sees the field in Kansas City, barring an injury or two? Because I don't see it.
I want to say yes, but I mean, it's Kansas City. it's, it's Kansas City. They've got them aplenty. But I mean, I thought that it was pretty interesting to see. You saw what they gave him. I mean, Kansas City clearly thinks a little something about Kalijah. Give him what was it, Chris, 110,000 or something like I think it was
I think that's close.
10,000 signing
Yes.
bonus for $100,000. I mean, let me ask you this: would you classify that as the equivalency of a preferred walk on?
Yeah, but it's a preferred walk on to Clemson.
Hmm. Wasn't Hunter Renfro a walk on
I
at
knew you were
Clemson?
going to say that. Yes, but
I, yeah, how'd you know? You just said it.
I know. I mean, it popped into my head the minute I said it. My office has been invaded by my children, so I'm
What up, kiddos? The
slightly
leaves.
distracted. You can
Oh, that's
hear
a
them.
good thing.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, it's not. It's good times here, but
You put me in a Clemson window, so I mean, that's a perfect, relevant, recent example of the possibility. Look, Kalijah's a good football player. You know, look, last year was what it was. It just was. I don't know how to. Here's what I say. I think that NFL teams are smart enough and have done enough homework to see through the garbage and the crap that was last year. Okay. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I think that they saw the potential between in those other two in the year before and the times that they played before to see these guys can produce if they've got a quarterback. Because what happened when they had one, Chris? They produced.
let me put it to you this way. He's not better than Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, McCole Hardman, or Demarcus Robinson, right? We can agree on that.
Okay, right, right.
So Byron Pringle's their fifth kid from K State. I don't think he's better than him, so I just don't see it.
Well, I expect that room would probably carry six receivers, 5 to 6 receivers. Let's say they carry six, and you know who knows if it's a special teams role. I don't know, and who knows if it's a practice squad. By the way, nothing wrong with that. You know, and that may be what it has to be starting out. But I think that I think they like what they see out of Kalijah Lipscomb. And again, they do a lot of homework on all these guys. They've seen, because think about it, Chris. Before last season, Kalijah Lipscomb had plenty of production. Agreed?
Yeah, and that's where you have a good point. I didn't really think about all the way through because if he is practice squad, then those guys get exposed to waivers through certain circumstances. If he goes and has a good preseason, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter who he's with because if he doesn't have a path
That's right.
there, if he's good enough, he will have a path somewhere else.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I've seen a lot of good football out of that dude, and I don't know. I look like is he going to make that roster initially? I don't know. It'd be tough. There's no question about that. He's not overly fast. And boy, that often, they like to scoot. They like to get up and down that field. There's no doubt about it. But like I said, they thought enough to give him the 110. And they certainly didn't do that with the other undrafted free agents. So,
Anything else on the draft in general? I know you're a big NFL draft guy, but what caught your eye in that event?
first of all, I thought Roger Goodell did himself quite well for a commissioner that people generally don't care for and has a pretty rough reputation. I mean, he almost was like he guided us through it, and I thought that the draft, considered being completely virtual with all the potential pitfalls, I thought it went off pretty well. And if you're like, look, everybody knows I like to have fun and all this other stuff. When I'm talking about sports, I'm not big on fluff and all the other stuff. I don't care much about seeing orangutans, make the pick and all this other stuff. I like the draft itself, and that's about basically what it was because you couldn't do all this other stuff and have all these other folks involved. It was just straight draft. If you love that stuff, it was for you, and for me, it absolutely was. Now, for your boys, it'll be interesting to see. With Isaiah Wilson, he's a big dude, man. He kind of fits the mantra of what the Titans want to be, And I don't know if Dennis Kelly is starts day one for this season until Isaiah Wilson's ready, or maybe he's ready now. But I'll say this: uh, they addressed the areas in those first two picks that I expected. I mean, I think most Titans fans would tell you going into that draft they needed to find a right tackle and they needed a cornerback. And with Fulton and with Wilson, I think those were two very solid picks.
Yeah, I wasn't displeased with those two. Wilson, I wouldn't say he's a stretch, but I don't think it was a slam dunk pick. The Fulton one I thought
No,
was a great pick where they got him. The question to me is whether they filled enough need with picks 3 down, and I'm not sure about
yeah,
that.
yeah. Now, one interesting pick. Now, I'll say this: I would not have made it because I just don't see this guy making it in the NFL as a quarterback. Not because he doesn't play hard, not because he doesn't have a lot of gifts, but his mechanics just kill me. And that's Cole McDonald, the quarterback out of Hawaii. He's an interesting dude, I mean, and he was certainly productive. But some of his mechanics, I remember watching him in the combine, and it was just I mean, when he's good, but he can be all over the place. And his delivery, you would never, of course, look, I would never teach Philip Rivers delivery to anybody, and it worked. But this isn't Philip Rivers, And of course, I mean, he's a late round flyer, so it's fine. But I can't see him sticking.
Well, my 6-year-old son would like to disagree. He asked me to find highlights of him on YouTube and really liked him. I think that was his favorite pick of the draft.
Cole McDonald was his favorite pick for the Titans.
I think so. I think he saw those long bombs for touchdowns one after another and was pretty impressed.
Are you willing to sign off on that?
I don't know that I'll go that far.
John Robinson, you better be aware. David Lee is on the case. In about 30 years, he may have your job.
He watched, I'm not kidding, almost the entire draft. He stayed up to the Titans pick. He begged my wife for the chance to watch that. And to his credit, he went to bed right after they made that pick. And he watched the film of him for a little bit. And then he got up off his beanbag and went straight to his room and went to sleep. Was not in a good mood the next day, by the way. And then I bet he watched most of the rest of the draft. We turned off, I think, rounds 4 and 5. I was out doing some shopping, and I think my wife had turned the TV off at that point, but he watched a good bit of it and was just enthralled with every bit of it.
I understand how awesome. I think you do, because you know how much I love that draft. And to be 6 years old and to digest and all that stuff and watching film with your dad on Cole McDonald, that's amazing. That is amazing. But, the Titans aren't really a franchise that had a billion holes. And I think the things that needed to be addressed got addressed. And, look, there's still a possibility of Jadeveon Clowney. You never know. So I think a good team got better.
The draft itself, you talked about the production. I enjoyed the way that it went down and seeing these guys in their living rooms with their families and that sort of setting more than I do the normal draft coverage. I'll say this, there's a lot more leather sofas in America than I knew. It seemed like every every player in the draft had one in his family. But I enjoyed that glimpse into things, and it's not a side that you normally get to see.
No, it's not. It was pretty cool. And I'll just say this, because I know a lot of our listeners are big Titans fans. I will just say this to you. You know that I love you. You know I do. And the one thing that I will say, I'm still a little nervous because we'll see about Philip Rivers. And even if so, it's a 1-year deal. I thought my boys killed it. I thought that Chris Ballard just absolutely knocked it out of the park with this draft. I had decided, I don't know if you and I had talked about this or not, off the podcast, but I had decided before Thursday that the name, if Chris Ballard stayed still, the name that I wanted to hear was the name that I heard. Michael Pittman Jr. I think he's the single most underrated receiver in that class. Um, I saw the comparisons, and Jeremiah and some other comparing him to Mike Williams. See, I see same team, different receiver. I see Keenan Allen. Chris, I see Keenan Allen. I see a 6'5", 225, 230-pound guy who catches absolutely everything that you throw, who isn't a burner, but for 6'5", 225, 230, there's nothing wrong with 4.52 flat and catching everything. He's going to win the 50-50 balls. And if you get to know the dude off the field and you see some of the stuff he's got going on, I don't know if you know this, Chris, but he and his girlfriend have like a YouTube channel with like 100,000 subscribers. They've had it, for a while, and they've been doing that show for a long time. But a really enigmatic dude. And then Jonathan Taylor, that was just I'm generally not a big second round running back guy, especially if you got Marlon Mack, but he's got one more year left. And I'm thinking about Jonathan Taylor behind that Indy offensive line. I'm telling you, just like I told you last week, Chris, for the next 5 years, buckle up, Indy, buckle up, Nashville, because it's going to be some throw downs. Those two teams are going to be battling for this division for the next 5 years, for the foreseeable future, in my mind.
Yeah, I was not thrilled to see you guys get Jonathan Taylor as a Titans fan. And Pittman, if
Oh,
he turns into what you think, then he and T.Y. Hilton together, that's going to be a little scary.
well, he's the missing. He is what they were hoping that they had with Dante Moncrief, but these are two very different players, very, very different players, and that's the thing that they were missing. And they got it. What they need is for not only to hit on him, they need Paris Campbell to be healthy and come through. If Paris Campbell can come through in his 4.3 flat speed, then you start to look at some stuff, because they clearly want to concentrate on the running game. But if you add pieces like Pittman and T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell, and they can all hit, that would be a lot to stop. And one more thing, I'll say this: getting Jacob Eason. Do I love Jacob Eason? No. I love the arm, of the upside. But Jacob Eason in the fourth round, well, that's too much value. They did.
By the way, shifting the conversation back to Vandy, you texted me Sunday, and we know
Yeah.
that mock drafts at this point are basically useless and anybody can put one up, but you found something online about next year's first round that stunned both of us, and I'll just let you share it.
So I already started looking at mocks for 2021 because why not? So I've looked about 3 different ones. And on the third one I looked at, and I'll have to go back and see if I can find which one it was, I'm scrolling down to the bottom, and the 31st pick in the draft was a Vanderbilt football player. Who could it possibly be on the Vanderbilt football team? Now, if I hadn't told you, Chris, now it's not really fair because you know the answer, but let's just pretend you live in a world where I didn't tell you who it was. And I said, there's a Vanderbilt football player who was mocked 31st overall to the Green Bay Packers. You would have said who?
Well, that begs another question because, and I'm pulling up a depth chart because I may be forgetting someone. I can't name a player on that team that I'm sure is even going to get drafted at any point. Can you?
Somebody's going to draft Dio, I think, on his measurables. Dio would have been my answer. I wouldn't have said first round pick, but he would have pretty well definitely been my answer.
Well, do you want to spill the beans?
And again, sometime today or during the week, I'll go back so I can reference it better for you next time. Dimitri Moore. Dimitri Moore was mocked 31st overall to the Green Bay Packers.
You and I talked about this. Like, okay, what is it that they see? I mean, his production hasn't been much, and maybe you can say, well, Tarver and Mason just didn't draw up a good scheme where the kids understood what they were doing. And then you start to look at the talent. I mean, he's a big kid. I've stood next to him. He's fairly tall. I mean, he's got linebacker size. He was a very highly regarded player at a high level of Texas high school football. So I don't know if somebody was just spitballing or if somebody knew something, but he was a player. I remember you and I both thought that in fact, I remember talking to you the day that they got his commitment. We both thought that they'd gotten a good player. And if you add the physical attributes, and I don't know how well he runs, I have no idea what his 40 time would be. I'm just trying to work backwards and think, like, how is this feasible that
Wow.
Dimitri Moore is winding up in the first round of mock
Well,
drafts?
Chris, I looked it up, and here's another one. DraftUtopia.com, the 2021 draft. This has Dimitri Moore, 27th overall, to the San Francisco 49ers. And I'll read you what they had to say. Dimitri Moore has more athletic. Wait a minute. Okay. This says Dimitri Moore has more athleticism than Zach Cunningham. He also broke Vanderbilt's record for tackles by a freshman. Moore could be a first rounder in 2021 if he continues to impress on tape.
Continues?
I'm just reading.
I know. I'm just saying.
Great. I mean, I'll take that all day long. And I'm expecting a good season, especially with Ted Roof there instead of Jason Tarver. But that now makes two different mock drafts that I have seen him going in the first round.
If there's two drafts at this point that have him as a first rounder, obviously somebody out there thinks he's a prospect. So I think that floored both of us.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not about Dimitri from a negative connotation by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a good football player. I do. I didn't think that he was viewed quite to that level because not only did I not expect that, but again, I told you I'm not super keen on drafting linebackers in the first round unless they're just otherworldly. I'm gonna try to find them somewhere else. But yeah, that's the second one that I have seen him off the board in the first round. And you know what? I hope that's right.
Was the second mock draft you saw the draftsite.com?
Draftsite.com was the first one I saw. The one that I just read to you was draftutopia.com.
Okay. Draftsite.com had him 27th to the Dolphins.
Okay, well then that's three because the one that I just read to you has him 27th overall to the Vikings. And by the way, wait a minute. Oh wait, no, okay, okay, that's right. The Dolphins also have two first round picks next year. I was going to say, wait a minute. Somebody's predicting that the Dolphins will be picking 27th means they think an awful lot of them.
He's listed at 6'3", 230. By the way, another interesting thing is that when you Google Dimitri Moore, you know how it populates search terms for you? One of
Yeah.
those is Dimitri Moore NFL draft. So,
How many tackles do you think Dimitri had
well, I
last
just
year?
looked it up and I didn't. So he had 99, I believe.
Yeah, he had 99. That's absolutely right. This one I'm looking at now, Tankathon.com has him mocked 48th overall. So look, there's a consensus that this is a first, second round player.
Ourlads.com, which is a scouting service, has got a bio of him too.
So what did you make about the comment about more athletic than Zach Cunningham? I mean, Zach Cunningham could cover sideline to sideline like nobody I've seen at Vanderbilt.
I will admit, a lot of last year, I was just waiting for that season to be over, so I wasn't as locked in as have been some years. But I think if he was that, I would have noticed it by now.
Yeah, Zach, look, I mean, there's a lot of people who believe, and one thing that we can say over the years is the Vanderbilt has put some good linebackers out there. We can name them. I think there's a good bit of people, including yours truly. I think he's the best linebacker we've ever had. So
Yeah.
if he's more athletic than Zach Cunningham, and again, they didn't say he's a better football player, they said he's more athletic. I'll beg to differ on that too. I mean, think about the blocked field goal against Auburn. You know,
That's exactly what I was thinking. I haven't seen Dimitri Moore do anything like that.
I mean, and Zach's backed his play up in the NFL too. So I mean, look, hey, again, this is not a shot at D. Man, I hope he goes out there, balls out, and kills it. I'm just saying. I mean, those are pretty. That's a lofty That's lofty praise, and he's certainly been a good football player, but he hasn't been quite that good yet. But what I'm hoping is that with with the added talent, because this defense, look, we can say it can't be any worse, but that may be true, but I think it's going to be better. I do, from a personnel standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. So I expect that to happen. I think Dimitri will have another good year. But is he a first rounder? I don't know.
Two things. Okay, if you get noticed at Vanderbilt, you're doing something. If you get noticed at Vanderbilt on a dreadful team, you must really be doing something. Again, this
Yeah.
surprised both of us. And number two, if last year taught us anything, it's that horrible coaching can make good players and great players irrelevant. So there's that.
I mean, I'll ride that, but this though, and maybe it's just by nature of the position and pure reps. Having a bad quarterback affects a running back too. It didn't affect Keyshawn Vaughn.
Maybe that supports your argument because, Keyshawn was going to get the ball handed to him. When you're a receiver, that's dependent on two things. It's dependent on the quarterback to get you the ball, and it's dependent on the offensive line to give the quarterback
That's
time to
right.
get rid of the ball. Now, defense, you got your responsibilities, so I guess you're a little bit more free to make plays. A good defender on a bad team, especially at linebacker, is going to get noticed. So there is that. Dimitri Moore last year didn't grade very well on Pro Football Focus. Now look, they also keep him out there all the time. So he could probably benefit from a breather every now and then. But I thought something would have popped a little bit more than it has. But maybe they were just that poorly coached at linebacker last year. I think that's a possibility. Heck, we know they were.
One hope that I really have, Chris, is that this the defensive coaching staff and the new pieces there are able to extract the most out of. Because here's what I'll say: on paper, and that's all it is, because a lot of these guys haven't played yet or have barely done much. But on paper, when you look at it, man, if we can get some of those defensive backs to hit from a couple of years ago, the orgies, guys like that. Well, let's go along with Jalen Mahoney and then Donovan Kaufman from this year. And you look at Dimitri and then you think about some of the defensive linemen that we've got in there with Dylan Davis and Dio and Rutger. And of course, and by the way, we never mention these guys, but what about Cam and Drew? One more time. This defense was terrible last year, but from a personnel standpoint, potential-wise, maybe a guy like Ted Roof can get the most out of them. I think there's a possibility there. So I don't know. This is not going to be one of the Woody defenses by any stretch of the imagination, but I think you might see a much better defense than you saw last year. And not just because it's hard to get any worse, but because it has a chance to seriously improve.
Yes, I think that they bring almost everybody back. That's one thing. That's a big thing in improvement is when you get continuity 2 years in a row. And I don't think they lost a starter, did they? On defense?
No,
So there's
no.
that. The other thing, I don't know that Ted Roof is necessarily going to come in and be a transformative defensive coordinator. And he might be. He might work wonders, and they might be significantly better on that side of the ball than we thought. I'm not going to rule that out. But I think he's got a really high floor as a defensive coordinator and a higher floor for a hire than I thought they could possibly make.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with that, and that's okay because look, hey, the Derek Browns of the world aren't coming to Vanderbilt, and they have a way of making some coaches look pretty deadgum good. So we got to just have somebody who can come in and extract the most of. Now, let me say this: prospect-wise, they're bringing in better players to this defense. You can't deny that. That's true. It's true. That's not speculative. That's true. And especially at key positions. Because think about this, and it's not even just one player, but guys like Davion Davis, guys like Tyrion Surgic, who he's just a commitment right now. But those type of players did not commit to this school for the longest time. Now they're starting to get some better stuff. So while the Derek Browns of the world don't grow on trees and generally don't come around to Vanderbilt, I think that a guy like Ted Roof, whatever his floor is, pun sort of intended, It's still got to be, or it better be, marketably higher than Jason Tarver's was.
The recruiting thing is just hard to explain. I don't know if that's a coach thinking he could get fired if he doesn't work harder or getting rid of some bad assistants, maybe, but it is odd. I mean, last year was so bad, and they just didn't appear to have anything to sell coming off that campaign. And I'm not saying they're having a world beating recruiting year. I'm sure they're still going to end up in the bottom two or three of the SEC, but there's degrees there. There's a difference between getting a mid level 3-star player or a 2-star nobody wanted. That's a pretty significant difference. It's really been weird.
Oh, I agree. I just, you would think the way the last couple of years have unfolded that they wouldn't be able to convince anybody, but they are. I mean, they're casting a pretty wide net, and they're having some success. And I'll tell you something else, Chris. I'm real interested to see from a coronavirus standpoint how recruiting is affected for a school like Vanderbilt going forward, because I'm wondering a couple of things. I'm wondering, A, are prospects going to, on the other side of this, start staying closer to home a little bit more, than maybe they used to? And then B, if the last couple indication, it's not going to slow anything down, because I don't know what Jeremy, all of a sudden, this team it just has done nothing up until last year, currently has a top 5 class and is going down to places like Alabama and getting the number 1 player out of the state. I don't really know how that works, but it is. But my point behind it all was, I'm wondering if these teams who have these 80, 90, 100,000 seat cathedrals to play in, that's going to be the huge advantage that it's been in the past, because I wonder if they're going to be able to fill them up anymore, or at least initially for a little while, as people, or at least maybe hesitant to go back, sit with 100,000 of their closest friends, on a Saturday. Will that advantage and complete and utter disadvantage that we have had, will those still be in play?
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I would go one step further. This is a bleak thought, but what if they canceled the whole college football season, which I don't think is going to happen? Then nobody visits anywhere. That really levels the playing field for Vanderbilt, because you don't want kids visiting on game day at Vandy if you can help
No,
it.
you do not. I hate saying that, because there's nothing that makes me madder, but it's completely true. But you know what is cool? We have proven that it is possible to do something about it. We saw that. You remember how fun games were back in 2011, 2012 to go to? Remember that?
Yeah, it seems like it was 20 years ago, but
Yeah, and I don't like living in the past, but what it does say is it is possible to shrink visiting fan bases down, and it is possible to send them out with their tail between their legs, and a pretty freaking exciting atmosphere when the dedication is put forth. I would rather live in a world where at least that possibility exists, so that if the right people are in place, football becomes a focus again. Then hey, we could get back to that. And believe me, I've never had more fun in my life associated with the university than that time. So it is possible. There are places that exist right now that it's completely impossible. They're at a level and they can never go any farther than they're at. So it begs a question that I would ask you, Chris, right now. If you had the power, I want everybody to really think about this. And I'm going to use a school in this state. The University of Memphis' football program has had a 5-6 year run like they have never had. They've putting people in the league. They're winning 10 games a year. The attendance has certainly gone up, and there's a lot of excitement. Having said that, no matter what they do, no matter who they sign, no matter who their head coach is, they don't have a seat at the table. Not really. They can get into a BCS bowl, but they're not playing for a national championship. Now, we're not going to, but we could. We have that ability to. They don't. No matter what they do, They're not playing for one. Would you rather be in their situation or ours? Their schedules are boring for the most part. They'll bring an Ole Miss in now and every now and then, but their Saturday nights are made up of Houston and Tulsa and Tulane and Navy and Connecticut and stuff like that. There's no run on Florida's, LSU's, Tennessee's, Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia's. They don't have those. What would you rather have? If you could make that decision right now, what would you rather have?
Well, I'm going to sort of sidestep the question, and if you want to tell me, hey, that's not a fair answer, and answer it again, my answer would be from a football-only standpoint, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather be Memphis because you don't have to deal with Kirkland Hall. And I'd do anything not have to deal with Kirkland Hall.
Okay. Well, you remember that thing you said? I'm invoking it. And I get that. But I'm talking about the actual situation.
Okay, but here's the problem. They've been the constant in this for 60 years. I don't know how you separate one from the other. Since you asked the question, you make the rules, right? You gonna wave a magic wand and get sensible people in there? I mean, is that part of the answer? I mean, because if it is, I agree with you.
Okay, let's just say I did that then. I just waved my wand. Done. Sensible people. Now, what's your answer?
Well, yes, for all the reasons that you said, plus Nashville and Memphis. I don't think Memphis has got some things in its own right. I don't mean to insult Memphis, but come on. Which of the two cities are you going to pick?
Well, I mean, you got to remember, dude, I'm from Memphis. I can't come on here and be running down my town, man.
Well, no, but you want to live in Nashville. You know that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I love Nashville. You know that. I've always loved Nashville, and I would definitely love to live there. But yes, there's many advantages that Nashville certainly has over its in-state counterpart. But just from a football standpoint, I personally, I like winning. I hate losing. There's very little doubt about that. But how good is a team like Memphis? I think about Memphis 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago, Chris, if I remember correctly. They went up to Columbia, Missouri, and got their throats kicked in. What happens when you step up? Now, they played Penn State pretty freaking hard. I'll give them. Memphis is a good football team. They got a good football program. There's no doubt about that. But if you drop them, just drop them in the East. I mean, they can't hold up to that. They scrimmaged about a half a mile from my house every year for the start of the season. There's some really good football players on that team. Some of them played in the league now. Coxie is as good a receiver as we would have had in the past 5-6 years. I really like him a lot. But truthfully, are they a better team than Vanderbilt? Last year, yes. Last year, absolutely. Besides that, no, absolutely. Vanderbilt 2 years ago, I promise you, would have beaten Memphis. I guarantee it. They would have beaten Memphis.
No. No.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, sir. They would, too.
They couldn't beat UNLV. Okay, 2 years ago? Okay, maybe 2 years ago. I thought you said last year. Sorry.
I said last year, no, but 2 years ago, yes.
Okay. The question you're really asking is, would you rather be in the American or in the SEC? Is that not what you're basically asking?
Yes and no.
If you could start a football, because I mean that's easy. I mean, because you're taking all these things that come with it out of it.
I don't like one thing that I have always felt pretty passionate about. I think, look, if you're in the show, you're in the show, and if you're a Division I football team, you should have the opportunity in some fashion or to play for it all. I mean, think about this, Chris. Quinnipiac, should they get on a roll, could win the men's national championship in Division I basketball.
Yeah, but if Quinnipiac joined the SEC, if Quinnipiac joined the SEC, I don't even know if they have a football program. They'd have a better chance to win a national title in 10 years than Vanderbilt would, even with the head start.
No.
Yes, it's because of administration.
Stop.
They've had 6 winning seasons out of 60 years, man. I don't know what else to say.
Oh, man. Oh, Well, I guess I'd ask you this because I believe Quinnipiac does play football, right? What would the score have been last year between Missouri and Quinnipiac?
Uh,
About 150 to nothing,
59-3.
right, at best. And don't say Quinnipiac. Oh man, I don't know. It's just that's something that I've always felt pretty passionate about. If you're in Division One and you're playing a Division One schedule, you should have the opportunity. You're not going to, but you should have the opportunity to go. And then in a place like AC, the team do everything that you could possibly ask them to do, including knock off an Auburn team in a bowl, and it's still got.
But here's the problem. Kirkland Hall has a higher winning percentage than Vandy and Memphis put together and doubled.
Oh, do they got a picture of you on their wall?
I think they might after
Hall?
this year. You know what's funny
Man,
is, are you on LinkedIn?
no.
I don't pay for the premium membership to see who's looking me up, but I had several searches where it would tell me, you've been searched by Vanderbilt administrators. I thought that was an interesting part of my winter.
They're fans.
I think they're big fans.
That's what it is. Hell, I'm not going to lie to you, Chris. I've Googled you before.
I don't think anything interesting would pop up, but
I don't want to tell you what popped up. The only thing that I will say is I did not realize that you were that into sea lions.
oh, thanks. I didn't either.
Lovely. Where we headed next, Big Daddy?
Well, we've got the mailbag. Before we get there, because
Okay.
it's a question you're going to hate, and so I'll probably wind up answering it. Have you followed the Vandy Sports 100 at all?
Only the countdown. I haven't gone into reading the details or anything. Just follow the countdown. In fact, I think I saw, was it yesterday that I see, was it Will Holden?
Will Holden was yesterday, so I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Of course, you don't know who's ahead of him on the list, but anybody jump out as, man, I would have had this guy way higher or way lower in what I've done recently.
No, Chris, here's what I'll say about this list. However you construct this list ends up being constructed from 100 down to 1. I'm not going to have beef with it, not really. And you want me to tell you why? Because I know now whether I agree with them along the way. What I do know for sure, 100%, is you are not throwing darts at a dartboard. This is all going to be thoroughly researched. Statistics are going to back it up, and you'll have done your due diligence. So, whether I agree with these as they go down, you're not going to get a lot of friction from me because I know it came from a well-conceived and well-researched person. So I got no beef with that. So, I mean, I've seen the name so far, and nothing's really – I can't say, oh, my God, what is he doing on there? Not so far. I appreciate the work that you do and the work that you put into it.
Well, it's been fun, and if people don't subscribe to the website, you can go to vandysports.com at the front page, and I'm doing all these profiles for free. I figured it gives everybody something to talk about, and it's not a good time economically for people, so that's kind of one thing I'm doing to hopefully make the sports landscape a little bit more interesting in terms of my sphere of influence. I will tell you this. I've done that list 3 or 4 times at different times and for no reason. I mean, because these guys' careers are mostly over. Nothing's changed. They certainly hadn't played any ball in the time that I started putting this together till I'm releasing them. Sometimes I will make a list and then try not to look at it and then do it again. And I'll have a guy a dozen spots higher on one list than the other for no good reason. So I can't even make up my mind. The one that I think I'm going to have the most regret about, well, there's 2. I think I should have had Ryan Mullins higher. I had him at 67. I figured that might be a tough sell to the fan base, but that is sort of being stupid because really, who cares about what people think? If you think a guy's better and you've got evidence for it, rank him higher. I think I should have put Mullins higher on my list. The other one I keep thinking about, a lot of people gave me pushback on Adam Butler. I had him at 99, and maybe that's fair, but he just didn't have a big body of work at Vanderbilt. Again, not necessarily his fault, but the other one is Spencer Pulley. I think I had him in the 90s. I want to say 93. maybe even a couple of spots lower than that. And I think, given what he's done in the league, which speaks to the talent level, and I think given that when I went back and looked at his grades on Pro Football Focus, which I did not have at the time when he played, he graded out really well at Vanderbilt. That's one that maybe I should have ranked a few spots higher. I don't know, like 10 spots, but maybe 4 or 5. But I think those are the two that, like, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, man, I think I got something wrong. Those are the two that are sort of popping up the most.
Well, if you're running into that right now, I can't wait to see what, because the pressure, there's no pressure here right now. The pressure is going to be when you start getting down to like 25, and you have to start working things down. And then that's I think that's really when this whole list is going to be under the microscope. It's kind of like, here's where you are right now. You're playing beat the streak and you're at 10. There's very little pressure there. But what happens when you start getting to 35 and you can see the end of the light and the huge prize, and you start questioning every single pick and putting it under a microscope and going through it with a fine-tooth comb? That's when I'm going to be interested, when you really get into it, when you have to decide who that final 20. And by the way, have you already done that? You're done? You've already got it. You're just releasing it, right?
Well, you have to make a list, right? Because you're doing a countdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing the pieces for these players right before I release them. So sometimes the danger in that is I will stumble onto some facts, some little things that I hadn't really thought about. When I'm putting the list together, right, I don't have forever to do this. At some point, you got to say, well, I've made a reasonable effort. So what I will do is I've got this list, and occasionally as I'm writing the bios, I have switched and I've said, man, I've got him at 74 or whatever, and I'll look at his things and say, man, he was a little better than I knew, and I think he's better than the 3 guys in front of him. At that point, I'll make
Yeah.
some small adjustments as I'm writing and digging into players a little bit more. I will tell you this, the top 30 or so, I don't think anybody's really gonna argue with much. It'll just be the order. The top 20 or 25 or 30 were really easier to rank than the bottom 30. And not
I
by a
have
little
not
bit.
seen. Say that one more time.
Well, it's easier. Sorting through my top 30 has been easier to do than sorting through guys, say 70 to 100. I might have a guy at 94 that I say, well, I could make a case he's 71 if I really wanted to. That might be a little bit much, but I don't have a guy at 18 and I'm saying, well, he should be 3.
What I should say is the scrutiny will start, I think, the closer you get.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's not tough, but I've got the top 5 or 6, I think, as you research it, are pretty easy. Maybe if you want to go top 8.
I'm not going to ask you to tell me any names. I'm just going to throw one name out there and blink once if he's in the top 30 and blink twice if he's not, okay? Darius Coulibaly.
All right, there's your answer.
All right. Now, you wanted to bring one more thing up before we hit the mailbag, right?
No, I wanted to bring up the mailbag.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to bring up that other
No,
thing.
I brought up that other thing. We just talked about it. So today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. If you need home, auto, motorcycle renters, landlord, life, or commercial insurance, Josh is the man to contact. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at JD Minton HQ. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try, and I think you will be pleased. Vandy Fitz says, how do you like the new NCAA rules allowing players to sell their likeness, affecting college athletics in general and Vandy in particular? I think he said, how do you see that affecting? I may have misread the question. Said, given that powerhouse schools are already playing players under the table via boosters, will it just lift the veils without really changing much?
I'm not sure how it would lift the veil, because I mean, like, we already know that's going on. I'm to be frank with you. I don't believe the powerhouse schools. Maybe there's a chance I'm wrong. I really doubt it. So, I mean, I don't think it. I think we all already know that. How does this affect Vanderbilt? You tell me. I mean, how does it affect Vanderbilt? Look, I've never liked this subject. I told Chris this before the start of the show, full disclosure. I don't like this subject. I never have. When we first started doing sports talk radio, this conversation came up, usually because my co-host brought it up. And it is about the most mind-numbing conversation that I think I can have from the sports side of things. Because I've always felt like, man, once you open it up, you know, that there's no way to get it back, and it's going to change the landscape of this and that. As far as being able to pay them for their likeness, how's that work? Am I paying a left guard, money? Am I paying him left guard money? Am I paying him because his likeness is on there and it's a crappy team that hardly ever gets used? How much is that worth? And what does that mean? So, if we're paying for the likenesses, is that a feather in the cap of the big schools already, Chris, who already had a massive advantage over the likes of people like us anyway? Because I would imagine so. I don't know how this would help. If the question is how does this help Vanderbilt out, I can't see how it helps them out at all. But I'm short-sighted and narrow-minded about this subject. So Chris is probably much better person to ask this, because I am not for paying them so.
Well, they're going to get paid anyway, as everybody knows. I think the whole trying to put restrictions around it is stupid. It's not like we're selling crack to kids. If somebody wants to pay a kid $100,000 to advertise a car, who cares? I mean, you wouldn't care if it was your next door neighbor. Why do we care that these are college athletes? They're getting paid through the booster networks anyway. So people need to stop getting bent out of shape about that, and really not worry about how we're going to just let the market pay people. And if some idiot somewhere wants to pay a guy $100,000 more than he's worth, so be it. It's America. It's a free country. Now, if I'm Vanderbilt, this is where I think this is relevant. And the NCAA is doing everything it can to draw a fence around this, because I'm sure what it's thinking probably is we don't want this cannibalizing from athletic donations and donations to the school. But here's what I'm doing, okay? If I'm a Vanderbilt booster, I am looking at the situation. I'm going, for instance, somebody told me, they've been talking about the locker project over at Vanderbilt for 10 years now. They still don't have the locker project off the ground, even after reducing the cost to under $5 million. They can't get simple things done like that because of Kirkland Hall and everything else, and just bad hires and having people running athletics who don't need to run athletics. I mean, we've done this podcast before, so I'm not going to go on and on, but this is what I'm thinking. If I am a booster at Vanderbilt and I'm frustrated by the system, I'm getting together. I'm getting a network. I'm going, how in the world do we get together and build a system where we make sure our kids get athletic endorsements? And I think that's where you catch up, because the school certainly isn't going to do it by building facilities and doing nice things for athletics. To me, that is where you have a window to gain advantage. And being in Nashville, which is a place where you are crazily marketable because of all the demographics and everything, I'm doing everything I can, if I'm a Vanderbilt booster and no others, to make sure we do something. If it's going to a car dealership and paying a guy $50,000 for a car that's worth half that, and saying, hey, you do with it what you want. By the way, we got this running back over here who's an All-American. You might want to use him for your advertising campaign. Put him on a billboard, pay him for it. I'm doing something like that. I think it's a window if you play your cards right.
Yeah, problem is you wouldn't even be the most marketed players in your own city.
I don't care. Forget about the marketing stuff. It's a way to get cash to players. It is a way to level the playing field where you're not cheating. If you have boosters involved, I guess it's cheating, but the NCAA has got Will Wade on a wiretap, and nothing has happened to LSU. So I don't feel too bad about that if I'm a booster.
What is your main goal here? To get those players paid?
Yes, absolutely. If you're not going to win because your school won't commit to facilities and stuff like that, get your best players there by however you can. Tim Corbin gets players to campus because they think long term they're going to be better off because they're going to
You
be
think you're going
drafted
to win?
higher. They're going to have an education. It's just trading one commodity for another. It's like, come to Vanderbilt and we'll make your situation better.
Yeah. And you think that your boosters are going to win these bidding wars against Alabamas and Tennessees of the world, who clearly that's their life. They'll risk going to prison to get stuff done. You're not going to outbid them.
No, but it
change
doesn't
I'm
make
saying
the
you go and get
situation any
Vanderbilt players
worse.
pay
Those
all
schools
you
are
want.
paying
It's not
players
gonna change
anyway.
anything.
Look, if you've got the AD has walled off donors to give to athletics anyway, now nobody can tell you what you can and can't do.
We're going to have these legal bidding wars, and it no longer becomes about what type of school Vanderbilt is and how it can help you for the future. Is it what boosters have the most money?
Of course it is. Hang on a minute. If everything becomes a commodity and you get $100,000 for going to Alabama, you get $100,000 for going to Vanderbilt, which degree is better? You start stacking stuff on paper, you get to live in Nashville. It is not going to make your situation any worse.
And then you start what? You start taking players that normally we ought not take, that we read about, not for the right reasons.
If you can get them into school, then
were able
yes.
to outbid somebody.
Who cares? We're not selling crack to 6-year-olds. Why does this bother people? If a guy is worth it and people are willing to pay, why do we want to get in the way of a market for that kind of thing if it's not hurting anyone?
It's not hurting anyone. Well, not that we're perfect, but generally, for the most part, now we've had a couple of incidences that would speak against that, but it's the exception, not the rule, is that generally, for the most part, we get people who are thoroughly interested in academics and what life is like after college and after football. But if it's all about who can deliver the biggest Christmas present, then I think we start bringing in people that probably don't need to be on that campus.
So Alabama and Georgia's not going to pay that kind of player if he's an elite prospect anyway.
Who's saying that?
You just said a kid that wants education, and you made that whole argument about that. I'm saying if the kid's that good of a football player, then he's not going to be less likely to come to Vanderbilt.
This is what I don't like about this conversation. Not me and you, but this whole subject period. I'm about the game. I'm about the sport. I'm about the football. This other stuff, getting those kids paid, is of no interest to me whatsoever. At all.
There was a certain school that played in the college football playoffs this year that had kids staying down on Bourbon Street, recruits for money that you and I would never pay for a hotel room. The stuff is going to happen anyway. It is not going to stop those schools. Why is everybody against the guy that wants to try to do it honestly now having a window into the game? What is so bad about money going to the kids instead of Uncle Joey, who's steering a kid to this school or that school, and the kid doesn't even know what's going on? I think we are so used to the status quo that it clouds everybody's thinking. Maybe that's just me.
Is that I have a problem with the kids getting paid. It's not so much that I got a problem with kids getting paid. I don't know. I know that once, and you say, well, they do it under the table. Well, yes, there's nobody that doesn't know that. Everyone already knew that. But now it just becomes this free-for-all thing. And basically what we're saying is, well, we couldn't stop it, so just go ahead. Here we go.
How is this hurting Vanderbilt in the recruiting battle with another SEC school? Is there a kid that suddenly is going to be taking cash? If that's what he really wants, it wasn't going to take it anyway and go somewhere else?
I think that the type of player that you're talking about, the caliber of your player that you're talking about, if those schools want them, you're not outbidding them. Why is it such a good thing if it doesn't change anything?
It doesn't change anything for the worse. Here's the other thing. I have always maintained, I think the NCAA should be a lot more interested in stuff that happened like at Michigan State with the Olympic gymnast doctor and all the stuff that happened. Focus your attention on like crime and stuff like that. And not on Lance Goldburn getting a parking pass. It was $10 above what he should have gotten.
I don't disagree with that. I feel bad for saying this, and I shouldn't. I shouldn't feel bad about this at all. But that's why this subject, I feel about the subject the way that I do. I don't care about those things. I don't care about parking tickets for players. I care about the players and how they play at my school. That's it. The other stuff, it's not fluff to me. It's just not my concern. Why should it be? Why would it be?
Well, it determines the market for players. It determines who gets who.
It determines who gets well. Like I said, again, those big dogs, if they want them, you're not outbidding them. So as you said, nothing's going to change for our program for the better. You just got through saying it. So why would this matter to me?
It gives you a window into the game if you want to do it legally now. It does not make it any worse.
Maybe not, but I'm always looking for how is it going to make my team better, and I just don't know how it does.
Well, I know you hate the topic. I won't bore you any longer with it. I've got kids invading my office constantly now. I think they're getting restless. So let's end the podcast. I'll let you tell the folks where they can listen to your show and find you online.
You can find me online on Twitter at Cheap Seats Bass, and you can find me on the radio dial Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. on the Cheap Seats, 101.5 FM in Jackson, Tennessee.
Hey, thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, he's Seabass and Chris Lee. Thanks for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.